I want to talk about an element of the wounded child part. The wounded child is our internalized emotional pain. It's just a word that we describe this part of us. Do I believe that we have a little child on the inside? No, not literally. But part of the reason why we call it, sometimes there's a misunderstanding about this part. Some say, well, I wasn't wounded in childhood. Well, that's not exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about the part of us that carries any emotional pain that's been internalized. So that means that I've experienced something, I've had a natural emotional reaction to that. I hadn't, for whatever reason, externalized it, so I kept it on the inside. As we know, uh, the wounded child is internalized emotion or emotional pain. And we define emotional pain as any uncomfortable feeling. So if I'm feeling afraid, it's uncomfortable, right? If I'm depressed, it's uncomfortable. If I'm sad, it's uncomfortable, lonely. So as opposed to identifying that whole gamut of emotions, we just call it emotional pain because it hurts. And we also know that emotions is energy. So, for example, you put gasoline in a car and then it hits the engine and then it gets ignited, and that energy has expression to help drive the car. Our emotions are the same way. They give us energy. And when we haven't been trained well how to manage them, how to let that energy work for us, then sometimes it gets internalized and comes out in indirect ways. The opposite of internalization is what? Externalizing. Now, in general, this is a generalization, but in general, women are given more skills in managing the emotional life more than men. Not always, but I would say that's generally true. And so oftentimes men will have a tendency to internalize a lot more and carry a lot of emotional energy on the inside. HollyKem and I lead an online program called Transform You. It's an intensive online coaching program for individuals and couples. If that's something that you're interested in, click on the link below and we'll get you some information. Now back to the teaching. But I think we both struggle with different emotions. Sometimes women have more permission to express sadness, hurt. Men oftentimes have more permission to express, say, anger, um, fear. I don't know, but that may vary according to gender. But all of it is managing it. So fundamentally, we manage the emotional pain, or the opposite happens. The emotional pain manages us. There's a general adage that we live by, which is what we don't talk out, we end up acting out. So if Holly constantly does something that aggravates me, I don't talk it out, I don't talk it out, I don't talk it out, I'm going to act it out in some way. I'm going to say something sarcastic. I'm going to burn her food. I'm going to accidentally forget to do something for her. You know, it'll come out in a sideways way. So it's important to really become a master of expressing our emotions because we will express it in some way. Now, this is the part that I wanted to spend a little time on is, and it's so important, is the two characteristics of the wounded child or internalized pain is that it has no sense of time. That means that the part of me that carries my emotional pain doesn't know the difference between 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, yesterday, and today. And secondly, that part of us thinks in symbols. It gets certain symbols can stir it up. I remember working with a guy. He said, every Friday night, he says, I need to go out with my friends. And my wife gets mad because I'm out late. I have a few beers with my buddies. He says, I don't do it on Thursday. I don't do it on Saturday. I don't do it on Sunday, any other day. But Friday, I get stirred up and I got to get out the house and go hang out with my friends. It's been a source of tension. So I started asking him some questions. I said, well, what was it like Friday nights like when you were growing up? He said, well, that was the night that my dad would go out and drink. And when he would come home from work, it often was the night that my parents had fireworks, where they would argue a lot. They would sometimes it got out of hand. It was a real scary time. And that was typically his night. He didn't really drink much on the other nights, but Friday nights was the day that they constantly had problems. So once he started to put together that a part of him on Friday would get restless and want to get out of the house in order to feel safe, that even though he had a good marriage and that wasn't happening in his life as an adult, there was a part of him that would get stirred up and he would be compelled to leave on Friday nights. And once he started to realize, like, he's still reacting from an old wound in a context that it's no longer appropriate, but the symbol of Friday night is triggering him. And once he put that piece together, then things changed dramatically. I want you all, as you do your work, is to really become sensitive to the symbols. And as you do that, it really helps you actually make choices.